Everybody, it looks like it is officially 4 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get this webinar started. Good afternoon and happy November. As I've said multiple times while you've been joining from the waiting room, I am Shannon Clifford and I'm the Executive Director of the Mesa Verde Foundation. If you've joined us for previous webinars, you are likely wondering where our regular moderator is. Monica Buckle is unable to join us today, but we will be happy to welcome her back to moderate in December. As many of you know, the Mesa Verde Foundation is the official philanthropic nonprofit partner to Mesa Verde National Park. As a foundation, we secure funding for the park's capital improvements, special projects, and work to promote understanding and preservation of ancestral Puebloan culture. Our work is made possible by supporters like you. As we approach the end of the year, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to remind you of some of the very important giving options for year-end gifts. Giving Tuesday is a national day of giving that encourages people to support organizations they believe in. This year, Giving Tuesday is November 30th. If you would like to make a gift to the Mesa Verde Foundation for Giving Tuesday or any day, you can do so at our website. That's www.mesaverdefoundation.org. For those in Colorado who would like to support the Mesa Verde Foundation through a local effort, you can make a gift on Colorado Gives Day, which is Tuesday, December 7th, or by scheduling your Colorado Gives Day gift now. When you make a gift through Colorado Gives Day, a portion of your gift will be matched through the incentive fund. If you would like to make or schedule a Colorado Gives Day gift, you can do so at www.coloradogives.org/Mesa Verde Foundation. As many of you know, and is probably the reason you're joining us this afternoon, we are delighted that Nathan Brown, the Interim Chief of Natural Resources and Biologist Wildlife Program Lead at the Mesa Verde National Park and Yucca House National Monument, will be leading this webinar about the wildlife of Mesa Verde, past and present. A little bit about Nathan. After graduating from Syracuse University with a Master's of Science in Biology and 1 season in fisheries, habitat, and wetland protection at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Nathan Brown moved west to join the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources as a full-time wildlife biologist in Native Species Branch office in Cedar City, Utah. Following 4 years with UDWR, Nathan was recruited to be a field office of 1 as an ecologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. His work included studying 2 threatened species, the Utah prairie dog and the Mojave desert tortoise. 6 years later, Nathan joined the Bureau of Land Management in Farmington, New Mexico, once again as a field office of 1. Serving as a biologist and an advocate for threatened and endangered plants in an office that was very active in energy development. This change gave Nathan a chance to move to Mancos, Colorado, to live with his then girlfriend and now wife, Kelly Pettyjohn, on her organic farm. After 3 years with a BLM in Farmington, Nathan accepted the position of wildlife biologist at Mesa Verde National Park, where he has been for the past 2 years. He also serves as an adjunct instructor in biology at Pueblo Community College, Durango. He has authored a handful of scientific publications in peer-reviewed journals. Nathan spends his non-work time mountain biking, whitewater boating, backcountry skiing, family camping, and wrangling their 3-year-old son. Now, traditionally, we hold our questions till the end of the webinar, but Nathan has offered to answer questions as they arrive throughout his presentation. There is no need to hold your questions until the end. If you would like to ask a question, simply type it in the chat box and I will relay the questions to Nathan, who will then answer them. Now, please join me in welcoming Nathan Brown. Nathan?
Yeah.
Here he comes.
Okay, and then I gotta share my screen. Oh God. Oh God. Oh, here we go. Oh. Okay. Sorry, just a second. Okay, can everyone see me, I guess, right now?
We can see you. Absolutely.
All right, I'll take my hat off. I just had to wear the ranger hat at the beginning, you know. There it is.
I like the ranger hat.
Made an appearance. And I just want to be very clear, Shannon, on the intro, I did not work for the Bureau of Land Management. That's all right. No, it's fine. I sit in the Bureau of Land Management office in Farmington, working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, an advocate for threatened and endangered plants in an oil field, which was challenging. So anywho, I guess I'll just jump into it. And like Shannon said, yeah, I wish I could see everyone and you could just ask me questions, but I'll just jump in. And if you have a question, do not hesitate. I really don't like just talking at people. If you're interested in something's burning on your mind. So I guess you won't be able, can you see me if I'm doing, you can still see me? Is that right?
We can see you. You're going to be little, but we'll be able to see you.
Okay, I understand. All right, let's get going here. Okay. At any point I might jump around and do whatever. And again, like I said, ask questions if you have them. And so I guess really what this talk is about is just some of the, you know, everyone's favorite charismatic megafauna that we have in the park. Some historical perspective on some of the species. Some of them that don't, don't live in Mesa Verde anymore. I just kind of pick some of the more popular ones and some of the other ones that I'm trying to get the word out that Mesa Verde has. So yeah, and this is I'm just trying to educate folks. So I guess we'll just we'll go for there. And if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. There it is. There, that's me. That's who I am. Bears. Everyone loves bears. I love bears. I mean,
Nathan, we can't see your screen.
Oh no, that's not good. You can't see my screen?
Nope.
You can see it now?
No.
Slideshow. Let me go back. Hold on. Sorry about everyone.
It's quite all right. This is what happens in live presentations.
Share screen. Okay, here we go.
There you go. We see you now.
Okay. Now let's do this. Okay. Now are we good?
Yes.
Okay. So we will talk about lions and bears and owls and other wildlife in Mesa Verde. That is the geologic overlook. That's a cub and two cubs and a sow. This is really about not just what we have in the park, but also kind of like regional wildlife. Because I think a lot of Americans have really it's often misunderstood what kind of bears we have in the United States of America. And so I want to talk a little bit about grizzly bears, even though we do not have them in the park currently. So I looked, the park had a naturalist in the 80s and 90s, and she was from here and knew a lot of the local folks and did a lot of interviewing people and got oral histories from mostly Anglo settler descendant people. But she really was thorough and there's a lot of records that are built on her interviews. So if anyone knows Mesa Verde or been here before, the La Plata Mountains are just those mountains just to the northeast of the park, not that far at all. And it's where I spend, almost some part of my week every week up there, recreating or driving my truck around one way or the other. But what's really interesting is there are records of a local veterinarian's wife whose dad used to hunt grizzly bears, and they were probably here until the 40s, in this area. The last, a lot of y'all are from Colorado. I don't know if all of you know that, but the last grizzly that, and I'll show you a map the next slide, but the last grizzly that was shot outside of sort of Idaho and Montana and Wyoming in the lower 48 was, he wasn't shot, he was stabbed, she was stabbed to death with a broadhead arrow in a pitched fight between a hunter and her. on a pretty narrow ridge southeast of Pagosa Springs, really close to the New Mexico border and the high San Juans. And that really stands out because all the other records, New Mexico, Arizona, Kansas, Nebraska, Oregon, California. I mean, these were all, I have a little map actually, it shows you some dates, but they were all gone by the 20s and 30s. So the fact that there was one roaming around in the San Juans, not far from here, that was the year I was born, 79, I think is just really powerful and speaks to some of the wild country that we still have around in southern Colorado, I guess would be what I would say about that. There is a suite of archaeological evidence of bears in Mesa Verde from our museum collection. So there were definitely bear bones in historic dwelling and archaeological sites here at the park. So we know for sure that bears definitely were on the mesa while folks were here for the last couple thousand years, for sure. What's really interesting, I think, is even for black bears, right? So that's the one that lives almost in 38 out of 50 states in the lower 48, Ursus americanus. There was really very few records, if any, in the park from the early 40s to the 1980s. Okay, so you say, what's going on there, right? It's not a paucity of records. There's still records being kept. There's still people looking for bears. But what that really is reflecting a regional trend. So outside of the high country, east of here, between here and Denver, but from here west across the Colorado Plateau and into the Great Basin and from here to Reno, effectively. So Utah, Nevada, a lot of the black bear, even the black bears, basically, Anglo folks got here. I use Anglo just to say white European people of European descent that came here in the 1870s, 1880s. So there was a period of time from the 1880s till, depending on the state, to the 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s, where black bears actually had no protection under state law. So meaning that they could just like right now in Colorado, you can shoot a raccoon, a red fox, or a coyote without a small game license or anything like that. You can just shoot them on site at will. So that was the same case for black bears in the Intermountain West from 1880 till 1930, 40, 50. In Colorado, it was about the 30s, I believe, that they made the law. It wasn't until the late 50s, early 60s that the Utah Division of Wildlife passed a law saying, hey, you can only shoot this many bears. These are laws that we take for granted now. Oh, we have different units and you can hunt this many bears here and there every year. But there's a big chunk of time there where folks were just trying to settle the land and get things in agriculture and especially with sheep and cattle to some extent. Bears were just a problem. And so, there's a long history both within what became the Forest Service, what became the Fish and Wildlife Service, what became, pardon me, the Wildlife Services, which used to be part of the Fish and Wildlife Service. There's all these government trappers, effectively. So there were all sorts of people that were paid full time to work for the government of the United States to just remove, and not just bears, coyotes, wolves, everything else. So what you're seeing there is just sort of this. It doesn't mean there wasn't an occasional bear walking through the park down the Mancos River. It doesn't mean there weren't a handful of bears up in the La Platas. But what it means is regionally, the black bear population was depressed, from here to Reno. And interesting, when I worked for the Fish and Game, when you go anywhere in public, whether you're working or after work at the grocery store, if you're in, you're brown, even now, I get called a forest cop when I go to the local grocery store after work, but obviously it's part of our job and we talk to folks, and I cannot tell you the number of times where I was working in Cedar City, Utah, so Southwest Utah, at the base of so really close to Bryce Canyon and Zion National Park. And I can't tell you local folks that I got talking to that swore up and down to the heavens above that the Fish and Game, who I at the time worked for, moved nuisance black bears from Yellowstone, and we released them on the top of Cedar Mountain, which is like 10,000, 11,000 feet right behind Cedar City on the Market Plateau. That we released these bears in black helicopters at night so that no one knew. Unequivocally, the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources never took nuisance problem bears from Yellowstone and to reestablish populations in southern Utah. So again, I just bring this up because in the park itself, we again didn't have records for almost 40 years. There was a sow of 2 cubs in what's called Moorfield Canyon in the early 80s. And then over as the 80s and 90s went on, into the early 2000s, and now we have a resident breeding source population of bears. And when I say source, I mean annual production exceeds annual mortality, i.e. we kick out bears. There's parts of Cortez in the spring and the fall where young male bears get into trouble all the time. And they're coming off our mountain, off our mesa, probably heading up maybe towards the Ute Mountain, McElmo Canyon. There's some bears in there. So, you know, we're producing bears at this point, I think, which is kind of neat and kind of exciting. And obviously we have some problems, we have some issues with them managing them, but we get a bad bear here or there every summer we have to deal with. But I think it's a pretty neat story. And I think that the fact that now we have them and some numbers, and I'll show you some pictures of some bears in the park here in a minute, but I think that's pretty exciting. So let me do a little, just a 1-minute primer on grizzly bears, just because so many folks, I think, just don't have any concept of where we have grizzly bears and where we don't currently in the United States. They, you know, my friends from back east and family just, you know, when I say, oh, I saw a bear, they say, oh, it was a grizzly or a black bear. And I say, well, we only have black bears in Colorado, you know? And I think a lot of people don't fully understand. So what this map you're looking at here is from the Fish and Wildlife Service. It's from one of their, I think their new recovery plan for bears. So this map is for grizzly bears, or what we call brown bears, Ursus arctos. There's a lot of, I guess you might consider them subspecies or what's called races of grizzly or brown bears, but it's a circumpolar species. So I should pull up a map. Google it on Google brown bear world distribution. You'll have no idea how widely spread this animal is across the entire globe. Again, their local populations are getting smaller and smaller, but you know, there's some hanging on in the Pyrenees between France and Spain. They never got rid of them there. There are 2 different populations in Italy of brown bears. One in the Dolomites on the border with Slovakia, northern Southeast Alps. Also, there's a population in this high, massive central plateau area. I can't remember the name of it right now, in Italy, just east of Rome, 50 miles. There's a big central elevated plateau. There's forests, there's some mountains there, and there's a population of 50 bears that are still there. There was brown bears in Africa until the 1880s, 1890s, 1870s. Dates differ depending on the account, but basically in the Atlas Mountains that stretch all across northern Africa from Morocco into Algeria, into Tunisia, in Libya, there were brown bears there. You know, and that just blows my mind. And they were shut out by the late 1800s. But anyway, so it's all the same species. It's called a brown bear. We have a word, grizzly bear, but it's basically Ursus arctos. It's the same species across the globe. So this is for the lower 48 currently. So extant, meaning that they exist now. The These little black lines are what are called, they're just management boundaries in what's called a recovery unit under the Fish and Wildlife Service. The hash mark is where they estimated current distribution. And the blue, the light blue is sort of, well, we've had a couple sightings here. This is the extent of the sightings. So that's what this is not like, oh, we know there are 10 bears that live here. These little dots here in the Bitterroot, those are, oh, in the last 5 years, we've had 4 confirmed, verified by a biologist sightings. So take home, the only place we have them in the lower 48 really is the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem, which is this encompasses Glacier National Park, Whitefish, Montana, that area. You can see them spreading out quite a bit there. There's roughly 800 bears there. The greater, what we call the GYE, the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem, that roughly encompasses about 700 bears. And then there's these little mountains up here, mountains and rivers. One are called the Selkirks, which cross from the panhandle of Idaho into extreme eastern Washington, up into the Colvilles a little bit. And then the Cabinet Yaks, again, that's a mountain chain and a river just to the east of that, maybe 40 or 50 or 60 miles. And there's a core of bears in each of those. There are various government agencies that are going out and counting these bears every year, providing estimates to the Fish and Wildlife Service. So, there's 40 or 50 bears basically in extreme eastern Washington and the Panhandle, and then the Panhandle that bleeds into western northwest Montana here in the Cabinet Yaak. And then you have the NCD system. Oop. Hey, don't do that. And the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So does anyone have questions about that? I just think that a lot of folks just don't really realize. So that's all we got in the lower 48. You're talking 1,500 bears, 1,500 to 1,700 bears. They're the last. So these two black lines are what's called recovery areas that don't have established populations in them. There is a current effort with the Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service in the state of Washington to potentially release some bears in the North Cascades ecosystem. That's where North Cascades National Park, that sort of North Cascade country in central Washington there. What's interesting is this was probably the last place. There were sightings, I think 96 or 06, I can't remember. There, depending what you read, right now the Fish and Wildlife Service says there's no bears there. There were confirmed sightings there, and the ones you're seeing, the sightings, this light blue here in the Bitterroot, are from new bears expanding up into this ecosystem. Where the North Cascades, there were a handful of bears into the 90s, maybe into the aughts, that survived. Park staff or somebody would see them every couple of years, see 1 or 2 individuals. So there was a remnant population that may or may not exist, but there is a current effort, and they are moving forward, I believe, to put some bears back into that system. All right, enough about grizzly bears. We don't have them in Mesa Verde. I like this next slide because I don't know if it's big enough. You can see these little dates, but essentially the light green distribution is from an estimated range from 1850, where they were existing, and now, and the dark green is where, with the little dots, with the little, there doesn't mean they're there now. This is just where if you look at those little dates. So like right here, 1979, that's the one that was killed over by Pagosa by the hunter. If you look at New Mexico, the last date was 1923, right here in the northern part of the San Juans, up by Taos in New Mexico. You look, California, last one looks like 1908, maybe 1912, 1924. That's obviously in the Sierra right there. You see a lot of 1920s. Utah, the last one was up here. It's up Logan Canyon. His name's Old Ephraim. That was in 1923. The second to last grizzly bear in Utah was this dot right here, and that was just a handful of years before 1923. And I just show this because it's showing you what's occurred. We've lost those bears. Like I said, we have them here now in the lower 48. They are spreading out from the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. They show up in Cody, Wyoming now. These are called the Bighorn Mountains right here. They've shown up in the Bighorn Mountains. As far as I know from my colleagues and everything in Utah and Colorado, I don't think we've had a verified sighting in Utah or Colorado of a grizzly bear yet. They obviously have to cross, there's a big highway right here, I-80. Wolves obviously have showed up in Northwest Colorado and in occasionally on the north slope of the Yucca Mountains in Northeast Utah as well, but no grizzly bears. All right, moving on past grizzly bears. Okay. And what's really interesting is if you look down here, I think this is really neat. So the Sierra, I can't remember if these are the Sierra Madre or the Sierra Occidental in Mexico, but there's two ridges that go down. They, obviously the mountains are still there, and there's still black bears in Mexico down to basically following these distributions. But the last brown bear in Mexico was shot in those mountains in '62. Again, it isn't that long ago, really. But I think that's interesting. Okay. That is a bear that lives in the park in a place called Rock Canyon. So we did have a population of bears develop again in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. Last summer, it was my first field season. I spent a lot of time really collating all the reports we get from staff and visitors, tracking them all down. I spent a lot of time on the ground, and between direct observations that I made, I knew of eight or 9 or 10 bears that I saw personally. And then I had a camera and 1 or 2 different remote canyons that were ways away, and then matching descriptions. I came up with an estimate, somewhere between 12 and 20 bears were spending a good portion of their time in 2020 in the park. That's an estimate from a couple different observational methods. It is not we didn't put hair snares up and, get DNA and make an estimate that way, but I feel pretty confident about this number. It's certainly not 100. It's not 50. And, is it 10 to 35 maybe or something? Maybe. But, somewhere in there, 15, 20, 25 bears that are spending a chunk of and of course, they are bears. Some live probably most of the time on Mesa Verde, but out of this 20 or 30 bears that we have, or 15, 25, something like that, a chunk of them, of course, are also going to be spending time on our neighbors to the south and to the west, the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation. The bears climb over fences. That doesn't stop them. So they're moving up and down canyons, moving around, finding food. I've certainly seen several bears in Mancos Canyon on private and on the Ute Mountain Ute, which are, less than a mile from the park boundary. So we got a chunk of bears, and for a high desert ecosystem, I think that's pretty neat. Wolves, man, they are controversial. All I'd say is what we had, they were extirpated in Southwest Colorado, again, by the 40s. We had gray wolves, most likely not the subspecies that is listed now, the Mexican wolf, which is right now really where they exist now, the Mexican gray wolf, on the border between New Mexico. So there's an experimental non-essential population. It's a recognized subspecies. There were a handful of maybe a dozen wolves captured in Mexico in the, I don't know, 90s. I don't know, not that long ago, 80s or 90s. And then San Diego Zoo, Fish and Wildlife Service bred them back and put them on what's called really the White Mountains in eastern Arizona, or the Gila in central western New Mexico. But really, that was really the northern end of the range of that species. So really what would have been here is just, again, they're another species. If you Google just Canis lupus, it matches the distribution of the brown bear across the globe very closely. Just spread around the entire world, all through Asia, Europe. They never got rid of wolves. They never shot them all out in France and Germany. There were some wolves remaining, Poland, Lithuania, Estonia. So there are wolves still. I'm not going to talk much more about them. We have had no records of wolves past the early 20th century here in the park. One exciting thing is Yellowstone wolves are spreading out, and I don't know if you guys all followed that. It made all the news last year ago, last winter. This Colorado CPW, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, verified that there is at least one pack, and they had puppies, established in the extreme northwest Colorado, from Craig north in that country up there, and that's exciting. And for my money, honestly, if they're able to, wolves can go a long way. There was a collared wolf from Yellowstone when I was working at the Division of Wildlife, or actually maybe when I was in Fish and Wildlife Service in Cedar, and she went from Yellowstone, basically from Cody, near Cody, Wyoming, east side of the park, to the north rim of the Grand Canyon. She had basically a GPS collar on her, and then she made that trip 2 years in a row, looking for love. Probably made it to the north rim. On her second trip back north through Utah, very close to where I was stationed, she was shot by a hunter. Thought she was a coyote. But the point is, they can really cover country. So I think that if over time, especially as this is showing you, they'll find the holes. They'll find the places in Colorado that can support them, socially and biologically. Shannon, how am I doing? Is there any questions, or I can't see anything?
We haven't had any questions yet. I'm watching closely.
Okay. Desert bighorn sheep. This is kind of a red herring. There is desert or bighorn sheep, let's say bighorn sheep bones in the archaeological collection here at the museum at the park. Again, like the bears, so there is evidence that they were here, when folks were here over the last couple thousand years. And whether or not they were desert bighorns or Rocky Mountain bighorns, we're all, in all reality, by the time you get to the La Platas and the Weminuche to the east, they're Rocky Mountain bighorns. From Mesa Verde, you can see country that has desert bighorns in it. I'll show you a map here in a minute, but long story short, it was probably a hybrid zone. They probably moved up the Mancos corridor from the San Juan. There was probably genetic exchange. It was probably a hybrid zone, probably, honestly. Sort of Western Colorado is all like that, where, it was probably desert bighorns, but in the mountain, it was probably Rocky Mountain. Now, this is interesting. In 1946, because we did have historical or archaeological, evidence that they were here, we got 14 Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. I have no idea where we got them from. And they were released in 46. They didn't have, that was before collars and everything else. So they weren't intensely studied, but people observed them whenever they saw them, and that made it into the park record. So there was dozens of observations over the decades, but really interesting. The last eyes-on observation of one in the park, right, inside the park boundary, was in 2006. So that, for only moving 14 sheep and not doing a heck of a lot as far as management goes, that's a success. And there are observations of bighorn sheep herds. There's 2 ridges just to the east of the park at our same latitude, not to the north like the La Platas, one called Weber Mountain. It's really just a big ridge just on the other side of the Mancos River on the east side of our park. We basically, our boundary touches the Weber. And then just on the other side of that, valley, the Weber Canyon, is Menifee Mountain. And there were periodically observations on those ridges of bighorn sheep, presumably from our release. So, you know, for 14 sheep in 46 to 06, what is that, 60 years? That's pretty dang good. You know, and probably up to dozens of individuals across a couple of herds at different points. Oh, do we have a, no, do we have a, what's that?
We have a question. It says, good afternoon, folks. I volunteered in the park and was returning from Wetherell Mesa in midsummer when a solo brown bear crossed the road. It was moving very slow and seemed ill, but definitely moved away when it stopped to watch from beside the road. Should I have reported that?
Yeah, you know, that's up to you. I get kind of inundated by sighting observations, but I was returning from it. Yeah, I mean there's these little forms are scattered around the park. I'll make sure the volunteer coordinators get them next summer, but yeah, you can report it. You know, that it goes into a database. But there's definitely bears out that way, and as long as he didn't, you know, I always say to people, if you see a bear and he's just doing bear things, and you know, it looks like you stopped and he left, and that's, you know, you got lucky and got to see a bear. If their behavior is odd, you know, if they're threatening, if you see a grizzly bear, you know, let us know. But at the same time, you can, there's these little forms, they're scattered around the park, but you can fill them out, and basically they get to the internal mail and they get to my desk eventually. So yeah, you can feel free to report that for sure. But it was definitely, that's the other thing, I guess, you can see from this slide here. I do not like this. What? PowerPoint, what are you doing? I'm not gonna, oh no. Okay. You can see here, he's super blonde with a brown head, brown legs, brown butt, brown hind legs. All variations here. In the Southwest, there are black bears, this is just just phenotypic variation. Their pelage is widely variable. And that's why over the years, people think they see a grizzly bear because they saw a brown or a blonde black bear. But this is definitely a black bear, and that's all I'd say. You know, you can see those maps before. We just don't have grizzlies down this way. Good question. All right. So this is these are current hunting units, and the pink shaded is actually occupied, verified by the CPW Colorado. It's Colorado Fishing Game. I don't know what they're called. Colorado Fishing Game. So these units here on the west, up here, this is up by Dinosaur. This is up by Grand Junction. This is in the Dolores River Canyon. You know, what we are right here. These all would have been or are desert bighorn sheep. We're all, once you're in here, that's all Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep. So the closest population, if this is the park right here, currently of desert bighorns, there are some up the Dolores River Canyon. I don't know, it's only maybe 50 or 60 air miles. And then of course the river comes all the way to really close to the park. And then what you can't see on this map is there are desert bighorn. The Mancos River flows to right here and hits the San Juan right here actually hits the San Juan in Colorado, I think. But then, and then the San Juan dips down here into Arizona and Utah border. And just, I don't know if any of you guys have done boat trips on the San Juan, you know, from Blanding to, from Bluff to Mexican Hat. But, you know, there's all sorts of desert bighorns down there on the Navajo side, on the south side of the river. I think those are a result of, you know, active translocations by the Navajo Fishing Game. But, you know, they are desert bighorns that would have been, they absolutely would have lived there. So and that's even less mile. I mean, that's 40, 50 air miles away. So my point is that there really is connectivity, especially with these river corridors. If someone sees a desert bighorn or bighorn in the park, and I go out and I find it, it would be very surprising, but I wouldn't be dumbfounded, if that makes sense. No, we do not have any current plans to remove them because in 2010, to translocate them here, pardon me. In 2010, this is a Ziegenfuss is a biologist with the United States Geological Survey and their research division. And they did a big habitat suitability model. And so this is the gray area is areas that is adequate, adequate bighorn sheep habitat. But what's interesting is these different colors you can see. So the north side of the park, the yellow area, is within 6 kilometers of active sheep operations. So there are sheep operations, between Cortez, Dolores, and Mancos in that area. There are not a lot like there used to be, but there are some, and there are some down the valley next to Cortez. This down here, this is actually not even this isn't the park boundary. This is the kind of the mesa boundary. So right about here, this is all Ute Mountain Ute land. And you can see that green, the Ute Mountain Ute actually have habitat, a chunk of habitat, and they're greater than 17 kilometers of any known current domestic operations, at least in 2010. And you have this middle band in the east rim here, where it's kind of intermediate. It's somewhere between 6 and 17 kilometers. The reason I bring that up is because the state, there are disease issues. And so that's a big reason why they've collapsed that and habitat degradation. But with sheep operations through the, late 19th and all of the 20th century, that, there's a number of diseases that can go back and forth between domestic sheep and bighorn sheep, because they'll mate, they'll find each other and, do what nature does. But you'll have disease exchange and local population declines. So, looking at that, we have some habitat. Right now, we don't have any plans to go get sheep and put them back in the park. There's another reason for that, is that also, even since 2010, so I don't know if everyone knows, but about 70% of the park has experienced major wildfire in the last 40 years. And what that did is, Rocky Mountain bighorns really need to see, they like to have a really long way to see. And that's why they're mostly on these cliffs and cliff edges, and they go places where other animals can't, or except for cats, and eat the shrubs and the little grass patches and things like that. But as far as moving between these areas here, this is all just not even habitat anymore. And it's because when we lost the PJ, so pinyon and juniper forest, much of it is burned in these fires. Shrubs came back, and shrubs are okay for the first 10 years. But basically, once they get, 6, 7, 8 feet tall, you basically create this visual landscape barrier, pardon me, from the perspective of a bighorn sheep. And effectively what I'm saying is much of the park now, that's what all this area is that isn't mottled gray, is areas that probably was sheep habitat at one point, but now is not sheep habitat. So even when we had good habitat 60 years ago or 70 years ago, we probably, my guess is we served as a hybrid zone, as an area between Rocky Mountains coming off the mountain, coming down here maybe in the winter time, and desert bighorns coming up from the desert to be here in the summertime. And so there was some mixing on the edges, on the fall and the winter probably, and it was probably a hybrid zone, and there was probably 1, 2, 3 small herds that lived on the in the park, in our canyons, on the Ute Mountain Ute canyons currently in the Mancos River corridor. But now, now with Ute Mountain Ute and us and sheep operations, currently we have no plans to put sheep back in here. I'm not 100% opposed to it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not. Okay, that's enough about sheep. That picture is not from the park. I took that when I was flying sheep for the Utah fishing game. That's in either in Capitol Reef National Park or in the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in southern Utah. Okay, future sheepies, we talked about that. Ooh, so Mexican spotted owls. So this one really interests me personally. I love owls. I think they're really cool, neat creatures. So we had records of them since we started keeping records, basically, of all the wildlife in the 40s, all the way through 2008. We have been looking for them since then every year. We have a couple areas we always check, and then every year we may check some different areas, just trying to see if we can even get any detections. We have not detected any since 2008. I don't know why. That picture is a really famous picture. That's in Mesa Verde National Park. That's a Mexican spotted owl. It was taken, I think, in 2006 by one of our current archaeologists, Kay Barnett. Oop, I missed an N there. But it's Kay Barnett, and just a great photo. So, I have a couple different ideas about this. We do have other extant species of owls in the park, long-eared owls. I detected, so this summer on my different call routes, I detected long-eared owls, great horned owls, and saw-whet owls. We also have flammulated and northern pygmy owls. So we have a suite of owls. We might have a barn owl here or there. I've never seen one in the park, but we're not really the habitat, but that's not to say that one's not hanging around the maintenance yard or something like that. But so the closest populations are something called the Chusca Mountains. There's a population near Canyon de Chelly National Park on the east side of the Chusca Mountains. And then there's also the Dark Canyon Complex on the other side of the Bighorn Mountains, south of Canyonlands, just west of here in Utah. I can see the Bajos from my wife's farm. About 70 air miles. Juveniles, that's a couple days flight for an owl. Maybe they'll come back up here on their own. I don't know. The Ute Mountain Ute started, Natural Resource Staff started surveying again. They hadn't surveyed in some time. They started surveying again on this mesa. They don't. Their results are protected, but I don't know if they detected any. There's certainly some really good habitat for owls for Mexican spotted owls down there. The reason they matter is because they are on the endangered species list, and we have to comply. Obviously, not just comply, but as the Park Service, we really want to promote conservation and move the football forward for recovery of these species whenever and however we can. It is literally in our founding legislation by Congress from 1916. So I'm still surveying for them because there's still a lot of the infrastructure of the park. For those of you who've been here, the roads and the loops and the museum and everything really sit on the edge of the canyons where the owls lived. And so, when we're doing new projects and things where there may be impacts, I'm definitely still surveying for them to make sure that we're not going to impact them. And then over the last couple of years, I've started surveying in other parts of the park that haven't been surveyed in, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, just trying to get even just a detection, not a nest, just, hey, one called back, there's an owl back here. I can't wait for the day that it happens if I'm here long enough. I hope it does. Why aren't they here? Don't know. A couple things. One, we're at the edge of the range longitudinally. You can see right here. So this map is from the 2012 recovery plan from the Fish and Wildlife Service for Mexican spotted owls. And what you're looking at here, all these red dots are known, what's called protected activity centers. But long story short, it's a place where for many years, Mexican spotted owls have been verified by a number of different biologists. not just living there, but breeding there and making owlets, right? So that's all these red dots. And you can see here's our red dots. And as you go north, as you increase in latitude, there is no more red dots. This little red dot right here. There are some owls in Dinosaur National Monument and those canyons, the White River, the Yampa River, that canyon country there. And then there are in Colorado, for you Front Range folks, there are actually still owls. This is really, I don't know. I think these two are the ones in Colorado Springs that aren't real, but these are all in that sort of, this is the San Luis Valley and they're in the Sangre de Cristos. So in those mountains, south of Salida, north of Alamosa, there's those steep, the Sangre de Cristos. There are owls, and there's a lot of canyon structure coming off the sides of those mountains with trees and water and stuff. And they're in those canyons for sure, like near Canyon City area. So there are owls in Colorado for sure. But you can see, so when things go extinct, I hate to say it, range contracts. And oftentimes you find remnant populations either at the end of the range or in the core of the range. And here we're just not, what you don't see on this map is what the owls I do know about, wink, wink. There are owls on some Navajo country in here, like I said, and then these are the owls over at Dark Canyon and the Canyonlands and Moab and all that. But there are some owls in here. It's on the Navajo Nation, I'll just say that, but there are some closer right up in here. So it's really entirely possible that one, like I said, they can fly about 30 miles in a day when they're dispersing. So, at some point, maybe one will show up and then maybe another one. And then, well, we haven't detected them since 2008 and I keep looking. If you want to hear one, I think this is kind of neat. Let me do this real quick. This is from a Cornell. All right, you should be able to hear this, I think. So that's our main 4-note call. I don't know. That's my best. I've had other owl species come to that, but no spotted owl yet. So that's them. Let's see if the duet is. So what you're actually hearing there is a pair. That's the female saying, "Yo, where are you at? Bring back some food" to the male. That's what they make crazy sounds. And there you can hear the male calling back to his mate. Anyway, they make really crazy calls. Their calls are sometimes described as a bark. It's wild, man. I've seen them at different trainings, and I've seen them in Zion. I've seen them in Moab. I've called them. I've interacted with them, but I just haven't found any in the park. All right, we'll go back to this. Getting there from current. Slideshow. Okay, on we go. There's a picture. This is a saw wet owl, which I heard several this summer, and a long-eared owl, which I also heard this summer. These are from one of the former biologists here, Neil Perry. He works he's a biologist for the BLM in Montrose, Colorado now, and these are his pictures. I think they're great. But they were taken in the park right here. And when I detected both of these species this summer, the long-eared owl called back to me with my Mexican spotted call a bunch near Cliff Canyon, kind of near Cliff Palace. This summer, just this summer. Real quick, I know it's controversial, but I feel like I really need to at least address it. We have trespassed livestock in the park, or feral livestock in the park. We have both horses and cows. The horses that are in the park some of them, there were horses present in the park when the park was designated in '06. In subsequent early legislation, it actually called for by Congress, it called for their removal because they didn't want to damage the artifacts, and which they do sometimes damage. And now we have some cows as well that are coming from adjacent landowners. And so the horses in our park are not protected by the Wild Horse and Burro Act of 1971. So they really are just trespass livestock. And we are working on removing them. We're really going to start a project in earnest next field season. We started this summer. We trapped one horse and using some new methodology, and he's getting adopted out and everyone loves him. And it's been just a great experience. The horses and cows definitely degrade natural and cultural resources. What you're looking at here is kind of some sheet flow and spring structure and rock canyon. And all this is like bacteria and algae and mold. This is actual poo, cow poo in really sensitive areas. We don't have a lot of water. We have very little water. And as things change, we have less water. So, and you know, there are also red spotted toads in here, but at some point there will not be red spotted toads in here, which is a native amphibian. Elk and deer use this corridor. Bears, that photo I had of that blonde bear and brown stockings came from this canyon, and it's just being destroyed by cows and horses. So there's actually a couple horses in that canyon too. So here's we've counted the horses. This is so the blue are adult horses. The orange are foals that we observe every year. So you can see pretty stable. This year is an anomaly. That was the year we paid, we surveyed by helicopter, which costs a lot of money and is also very dangerous for everyone. So we didn't do it in subsequent years. Obviously, we had a higher detectability, higher detection rate using helicopters, but we go out here, the combination of park staff and volunteers, and hike around. Sometimes in the past, we've ridden horses around, but we are on an uptick. I counted 68 horses. Me and my staff counted 68 horses last spring. We counted 58 last year. So our borders, our fences are old. We're in the process of replacing high priority areas where the fences are down, or we know they're in wet canyons where cows are coming up and horses are coming up canyon from the Mountain Ute Reservation. And so it's an active project. The only one thing we're doing different is we're not rounding up the horses. We're not using helicopters. We're not using cowboys. What we did is the last couple seasons, actually since 2019 and 2020, we set up traps kind of like this, what you're seeing with panels down canyon. And we put water in. And this is a full-on trap I actually caught this trap with, but we set up these sort of mock traps, just some panels in a circle with some ins and outs. The horses can come in and out, and with water and some salt blocks, maybe some hay here and there. And they get to the point, I meant to put this picture on, but they get to the point, buddy, where, here, I'll show you because it really is interesting. Let's go real quick right here from myself. And we're wrapping up. We just got fish, I think, next. Fish and squeaks. Come on. Here we go. Let's see, preview. Nope, that's not the one. So this is actually me I'm watering the horses. They just come, I'm 5 feet from this horse right here. This is
I'm sorry, but we're seeing a map right now on our screen.
Hold on 1 second. Sorry.
No problem.
I have to select what I'm sharing. I should just go to whatever I guess they do that so you don't show stuff you don't people to see. How do meeting controls? Sorry, just real quick. It's so cool. I don't know. How do I make it stop share? All right, sorry everyone. This will just take 1 second. It's just a really neat picture. And now a lot of people get to see. I have to find this. Oh, this is a nightmare. You can't see that, or you can? Nope.
No, it looks like you stopped your screen share.
Yeah, all right. I guess we'll just have to skip it. Sorry.
It's no problem. Live webinars, this happens.
The image that, here, we'll try that. You can see that, right?
Now we can, yes.
So this is literally, I am sticking out the front window of the truck. These are the horses, their water tank is in the back of the truck, and it's going, we have to haul water out there. And this is a water tank. You can see the horses are, water's limiting, and there isn't enough water for them. I mean, they're not supposed to be here, evolutionarily. So, I say this because what we're really doing something new here. So basically, we're getting them conditioned to water, and then that's exactly what I did. Let me go back to here, stop share, here, share screen. It should be.
That's perfect.
You can see it.
We can see it, yes.
I can't see it.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
We are seeing the low stress capture trap that you used.
I'm just gonna have to go. Yeah. So here's the low stress trap. It was the same thing with this horse. I just put hay in there. I put water in there for like a couple weeks, and then basically there's a new fangled setup where this is attached to garage door springs. There's a little box with an antenna here. I was 200 yards away. He got in there. He was drinking out of water. I pressed the button, trapped him. So we don't have to prod them. We don't have to use electric shockers. We don't have to have helicopters or cowboys. And then we just took care of him and moved him to a holding facility. And now he's with a nonprofit, the National Mustang Association Colorado chapter, and we're ecstatic. And as you can see from that picture before, I don't think it will be a problem. We're going to try and trap the whole band at one time, so they all get to stay together. We're using low stress handling and capture techniques, and it's working. And so it's kind of a new way to do business. But honestly, paying helicopters and cowboys costs money too. It just takes a little more time, and I think we just end up with a great product. And he's only been at a ranch for a week or two getting trained, and he is the nicest horse. Everyone loves him. So it's just been a really great success. Rook, I don't want to run too long, but I think I just have fishes and squeaks. So is that okay, Shannon?
That's fine with me. People are welcome to stay or leave as they have time. So
Yep.
We're good.
What a lot of people don't know is Mesa Verde National Park, in the 90s, we got a big, huge chunk of land, and now we have the Mancos River flowing through the park, through the eastern edge of the park. I think we only own the bed and the banks down the middle of the channel. The BLM owns the other half, but either way, it's public land, and but we have a river, and there's fish in that river. We sampled last spring. We only got speckled dace and what's called a fathead minnow. It's native to the east side of the divide in Colorado. Not really invasive. We weren't worried about it. But overall, like all desert rivers, with less precipitation and climate change and land use, there's less water in the river than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago. A lot less, especially in a desert river where there's just less and less. There's 2 diversions or 3 major diversions above the park between where the river comes off the mountain. There's a BOR, a Bureau of Reclamation reservoir where my wife gets irrigation water from this river. Didn't get any this year. So, you know, this is kind of a common tale of desert rivers. Decreased water flow, increased use, diversions, less precipitation and snow. We should, quote unquote, currently have what's called a round-tailed chub, which is a sensitive species in the state of Colorado, flannel-mouthed suckers, bluehead suckers. There are round-tailed chubs in a hole that the state sampled this year just above where Love the Creeks comes into the Mancos River above the park, and on the Ute Mountain Ute just below the park. So that's kind of cool. But all we caught was speckled dace. There are historic records. So there's a diversion, a large diversion that is an irrigation project on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation between here and the confluence of the San Juan River. There's probably 40, 50 river miles between here and there. But there are records that we're pretty sure that at some point in big years, some Colorado river fish would come all the way up to the park in this area, razorback suckers and pike minnows. We're pretty confident there's some weird old records and they're pretty descriptive and it makes sense, and they probably did, you know, again, historically. So here's pictures of fishy. There's pictures. This is what we actually have, and they're just little guys. But here's a flannel-mouthed sucker. Here's a round-tailed chub. And Colorado pike minnow they're also called squaw fish. They can get huge. They're the kind of the top dog, you know, evolutionarily in the Colorado River system. But there were probably juveniles or younger fish swimming up, checking it out in the park at one point or another. That's not going to happen with the way water situation is, but maybe we can have some chubs and suckers back in there. And we definitely speckled dace is hanging on. So I think we caught like 20 in like 1 river mile and like 10 different holes. So they're still here in the park. We got fish in the park, which I think is pretty neat for a desert park. And then, okay. Squeaks the mountain lion. Everyone loves Squeaks the mountain lion. Squeaks the mountain lion was born on the Santa Ana Pueblo, just north of Albuquerque. There's a study going on there by the natural resource staff of that tribal government. They're trying to reintroduce some pronghorn and wanted to make sure, they knew they had a lot of mountain lions. They wanted to make sure, they wanted to see what the mountain lions were eating, simple as that, and where they were going, because they wanted to understand what their risk would be for reintroducing antelope pronghorn, which were native to that range on the steppe, just on the west side of the Sandia Mountain. So that's why they were doing it. He made his way. He just walked up here, and he's been here for over a year now, spending time on the Ute Mountain, mostly entirely on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation and on Mesa Verde National Park. So we're, you know, periodically, basically, I get something like this. I don't get this. I get a file for Google Earth, one file of dots and a file of purple lines. And what that is these purple green dots are where there are activity clusters, where his GPS collar is pinging the satellite saying, I'm here. And then these purple lines are basically his tracks between those sites mapped by the satellite. And so what's interesting is, so I'll just get this from the Santa Ana Pueblo staff. They won't let me see all their data, but they'll send this to me. I'll throw it on Google Earth. And then like right here, so there's a whole cluster of, can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Cluster of sites here. There's a cluster of sites here. So, and you can look at the time signature of those sites, long story short. And what he did was find that by looking at it, whether it's in the day or the nighttime, if it's in the nighttime, it's probably when it's feeding. And when it's in the daytime, it's a daybed. So this cluster is a daybed. And he said, hey, I got a kill right out here. Can you go identify the species and verify it and take some pictures and GPS points? So I've been doing that, working with the staff of the Santa Ana Pueblo. And this is just kills that I've verified in the last year, elk and deer. And so I take that, I get a UTM on my GPS, I head out there, it was really just 0.2 of a mile, 1/10 of a mile off a main road. So I got out there and I put a camera out, get some pictures. Here's some really neat pictures that no one really gets to see from Squeaks. And that is Squeak. That is Squeaks. There's his radio collar right there. His eyes are glowing in the night shine. And anyway, that's it. If you have any questions about Squeaks,
So Gloria does have a question. Gloria would like to know what prey do mountain lions hunt for?
Yeah, mostly deer and then small elk. There was just a paper in, I think, JWM in Journal of Wildlife Management. They are documented killing feral horses, and that's occurred in the Great Basin. There's just a big paper out of there that where they tracked a couple of mountain lions for like 10 years, like it was like something stupid, like 8 seasons, and they definitely started hitting them. But generally speaking, their bread and butter is deer, depending where they are, right? So in Mesa Verde, it's definitely it's deer and maybe some baby elks, some calves, and then the other thing in Utah, depending where you are, again, we don't have desert bighorns here. They will key in on bighorn sheep sometimes, and managers hate that because they spend tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars to reestablish bighorn herds. But cats can learn things. So if one learns how to specialize in sheep, it'll pretty much eat all the sheep in its range over some time period. So anyway, long story short, mostly elk and deer, mostly deer really, but occasionally, a calf elk or a small elk or something. So that is it.
Now, is that a picture of you and your wife and your son, I assume?
That is my little tribe there in Mesa Verde. We're actually at Square Tower House. So anyway, that's my spiel. I hope at least you learned something, at least something that you didn't know before.
Well, Nathan, we definitely appreciate your time. I'm just going to ask one last time if anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to share before we end. This is your chance. After this, you won't be seeing Nathan live. So please, if you have questions or comments, you can put those in the chat right now. We have a comment from Teresa, and she says, thanks so much, that she loved it.
Oh, yay.
Yay. Oh, and Jerry Burke says, wonderful.
Oh, good. You never know. I just yap and yap. You get
I think people enjoy that. I will just remind people that if you loved this presentation, that you will get this link emailed to you in the next couple of days. It'll probably be early next week since tomorrow is a holiday. Happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans who might be joining us, but you will get the link next week, and you are welcome to share that with anyone you think might be interested. We have someone who says fascinating, and then we have someone who says wonderful information, just fascinating, and cool mustache.
Oh, thank you. It's genetic. I got vitiligo on half my face.
And it looks like Jean and Polly say thank you.
You're welcome. It's really my pleasure. You don't get to do this kind of stuff often. So when Shannon asked me, I was excited, and I'm just glad that you guys got something out of it. That just makes it all worthwhile. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Nathan, very much. We really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge. It looks like we might be done with questions and comments. So right. I'm just going to go ahead and end this webinar. Thanks to everyone who attended and who had questions and comments. And thanks again to Nathan. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.